So today we are here at the MBBA's New York City Public Advocate Candidates Forum. And today we heard from a number of great candidates such as Michael Blake, such as Dawn Smalls, such as Jumani Williams, as well as Jared Rich about why they're running for public advocate. I also want to note that we made the request out to all the candidates because we wanted to be able to have an opportunity to hear from everybody before this special election. My name is Jason Clark. I am the president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. For those of you who are not familiar with the MBBA, we are the largest bar association of predominantly African-American attorneys in the tri-state area. And over these last couple of years, one of the things that we've really been focusing on is how we can use the law as a way to galvanize and empower members of the community. So we started doing these I'm a Solution programs, which this forum is part of, where we'd go into communities, talk about issues such as education advocacy, gender equity, voting rights, immigration law. And today we are here to talk with a few candidates for public advocate, because as we all know and as we've all been painfully made aware, voting and elections matter, right? And we want to make sure that for the public advocate, which is the second actually only to the mayor, it's such an important role where the individual who becomes the next public advocate will be responsible for making sure all of our city agencies are doing their jobs. There has been an increasing legal component to the job, where folks are using lawsuits as a way to be able to get city agencies to do their work. And we want to make sure that the folks that we're looking at, the folks who are candidates, such as some of the folks that we have here today, are people who don't just maybe share the views of us, but also the values, and also can be able to articulate a plan of action so that the individual who is in this role is in a position so that they can protect the rights of New Yorkers, such as all of us today. So first of all, I would like to give a round of applause for our candidates who are here. So to my right, we have Jared Rich, we have Dawn Smalls, and we have Jumani Williams. So at this point, I would like to welcome our moderator, John Owens, to come up here. And also, actually, as before we get started, I know how these things get. I just want to give a special thank you to Karume James, MBBA board member extraordinaire, who's the architect who made sure that today's event happens. So let's go.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Owens, and tonight I'll serve as your moderator. So in addition to thanking the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, as a Fordham alum, it's also the requirement that I thank Fordham for hosting us here tonight. What I'll do, though, is have the candidates sort of give their 2-minute stump speech intro, because I think that's easier for them to tell them who they are than to sort of me stumble over my notes and trying to capture who they are. So in a moment, I'll have them each introduce themselves. And then what the goal of this will be is to ask them a couple of questions as the moderator, but then provide an opportunity for each of you to present your questions to them, primarily because a few of them have other commitments, as you can imagine. The election will be next Tuesday, so they're in the final stretch. And so we want to be mindful of their time, but also thankful that they did make this a priority for this evening. So everyone should remember that the election is next Tuesday. Polls open at 6 and close at 9. And also, just in case you weren't tired of elections, on the 26th, they'll also begin to petition for the new Election Day primary, which will be in the last Tuesday of June. So again, be mindful, primary elections this year will now be in June. The new election law has changed, and so primaries will no longer be in September. So all of these people may be right at it again on the 26th, deciding if they want to run again for the primary. So just be mindful of those changes in the election law with respect to those things of importance. So at the moment, we have 3 of the 17 candidates who will appear on the ballot next week. Yes, 17. And so now, just going in the order that they are from my right, I'll have each candidate give a quick 2-minute intro of themselves and sort of tell what's important to them, and then we'll get into the questions. Mr. Rich.
You give us like 15 seconds. You give us a 15-second reminder or so. All right.
If you like, I'll give it 15
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jared Rich. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a product of the New York City public schools. Both my parents are public school teachers, now retired in Brooklyn. My only brother, my only sibling's a public school teacher in Brooklyn. I went to University of Maryland. I got a government and politics degree. Then I came home and got a law degree from Brooklyn Law School. For the last 10 years, Brooklyn Law School. For the last 10 years, I've been working for myself as an independent lawyer. I'm beholden to no one. I have my own office on Court Street. I deal with mostly housing and real estate issues. I'm the people's lawyer. I represent you, your family, your cousins. I haven't spent a penny on any advertising in the last 10 years because I get things done and I get results for my clients, for my family, for my friends. My platform here is very simple. I'm a first-time candidate, and I want to be a voice for all New Yorkers. I want to bring the same fire and passion that I bring into my private practice for everybody in New York City. I want to help all communities in New York City, and I want to focus on 3 specific things. I'm the education candidate. I believe that every single public school should be a great school, and I have no idea why the focus has gone away from that. We have a lot of kids that are losing the lottery of life at the age of 7 because they don't get into a good school, and they're completely forgotten about. And as public advocate, I want to shine a spotlight and remember those kids. I want to use my expertise in housing law and practicing housing law to deal with housing issues all over New York City, specifically in NYCHA housing, where we see a huge building maintenance issue, we see a huge missing money issue, and we need someone from the outside to figure out what's going on. I want to focus on the opioid epidemic, because we haven't heard a lot about that recently, but we all cross people all over the streets, addicted to these powerful painkillers, stooping over as if they're going to fall over, and nobody's saying anything. We have manufacturers that make this many pills. Sorry, Don. They make this many pills. They know it's for this many people, and they continue to make this many pills. And as public advocate, I'm going to shine a light on the manufacturers, the pharmacies, the bad doctors, and everybody involved in injecting these drugs into our communities and killing our families. It's a serious epidemic, and we got to raise a light on that. Now, the public advocate, one of the main things for the public advocate to do is to be the advocate for the public. And I'm asking you all to believe that a man can just come off the streets with no political experience and be the best qualified candidate and be the one who's beholden to no one who could truly keep the government in check. And I'm that candidate. Check me out, jaredrich.nyc. We'll take some questions soon. Thank you.
I'm Dawn Smalls, and I am also a first-time candidate and a graduate of Stanford Law School. I normally don't say that in my intro, but I always feel compelled to do it after Jared rolls out his Brooklyn Law School credentials. And I am one of a very small group of attorneys running in this race. And I think that's important to say in this forum, but I say it in every forum because I think it's an important criteria and qualification for the public advocate's office. I'm a mom and an attorney, and I am coming to this race with over 2 decades of experience in law, government, politics, and philanthropy. I've worked for 2 Democratic presidential administrations. In the Clinton administration, I was the assistant to the White House Chief of Staff. In the Obama administration, I was the Chief Regulatory Officer at HHS and part of the leadership team responsible for the initial implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because I have experience breaking through bureaucracy to get results, and that's what I want to do for New York. As an attorney, I've represented immigrant workers in actions for fair pay. I was co-lead counsel on one of the largest FLSA class actions in the country, representing au pairs, suing the au pair industry. That class action settled a few weeks ago for $65.5 million in the largest settlement ever on behalf of minimum wage workers. I have also successfully gotten clemency for a man that was serving over a decade for a nonviolent drug offense on President Obama's last day in office. And I successfully got an injunction against President Trump's campaign and Roger Stone in Cleveland, Ohio, in advance of the 2016 election for their voter intimidation tactics that were very clear and very clearly directed at Black and brown folks. That injunction was later overturned by the Sixth Circuit. So I am, as public advocate, I really want to focus on the big intractable issues that affect every New Yorker, no matter what their borough or their station. Issues like the subway. And I am aware, just like anybody else, that the subway is an issue that is not primarily within city control. But the public advocate is elected by all 5 boroughs in the same way that the mayor is. And if the mayor can go to Paris, the public advocate can certainly go to Albany. I want to engage on these problems, engaging all the stakeholders that impact these issues with an eye towards bringing results. I also want to tackle affordable housing and make sure that developers are accountable to the commitments they make to communities when they seek approval in the first place, as well as the problem, ever-increasing crisis of homelessness, where we have more children 6 and under in this city that are homeless than we do single men. This is a women's issue, and this is a children's issue, and that's something that I want to tackle head on. I'm sure we'll talk more in the Q&A, but I appreciate this opportunity to tell you more about myself. Thank you.
So we'll have Mr. Williams give his brief intro, but we've also been joined by Mr. Blake, and so after Mr. Williams goes, we'll have Mr. Blake give a 2-minute intro of just who he is, and then we'll go into the question component.
Is anyone actually keeping time? So I look at.
I'm trying to multitask, but we'll get someone else to assist me in that.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamani Williams. I'm a council member from Brooklyn, New York. I always start off by thanking anyone that came out and voted for me for lieutenant governor last year. I was told I was crazy for even trying, and we went up against a combined $37 million. We went up against every single one of the 62 county organizations. We came really close. We actually got 47% of the vote across the state. We won New York City by double digits, and we got more votes than any non-white candidate ever in a statewide primary. And so I always start off by saying thank you. And I say that also because when I ran for lieutenant governor, I actually said that I wanted that position to be the public advocate for the state of New York. And at that time, the Attorney General's office was filled. It wasn't a vacancy. And the way the world works now, Tish James broke all the ceilings that were available and became Attorney General, and now the Public Advocate's Office is available. And so I'm running for Public Advocate for the City of New York. I'm running as an activist elected official in the truest sense of the word. There are a lot of elected officials now claiming to be activists. It is a popular thing to do, but I haven't seen a lot of them in the streets with me. And when I first started out, I was told that I had to choose, actually, between being an elected official and being an activist. And I said, no, I don't. The best elected officials are actually activists. And so we sought out to show that you can be productive in both. And so many people have seen me possibly in the streets putting my body on the line when necessary, but then I come back and I get things done. So many people don't know that I passed 53 pieces of legislation, more than any sitting council member. I was ranked the most productive council member in the body of 50. I wanted to show that you don't have to go along to get along. Really briefly, I like to tell everyone what the public advocate's role is. A lot of people don't know. Some of the folks who are running actually don't know as well. So I always like to make sure that we give a quick synopsis of what it is. It was created in 1989. It's been around since the 1800s in some form or fashion, and it was concretized in 1989. Many people may remember Mark Green. He was the first public advocate. We're actually happy to have his endorsement as well. They said that they wanted the position to rise above politics. They wanted it to be a position where someone would make decisions based on what's best for the public, not what's based on best for themselves as an elected official. They gave it 5 powers. The first one was introducing legislation in the city council. The second was as an ombudsman, a watchdog over city government, and a go-between between the people and the government. The third is a charter cop. If elected, I want to spend a lot of time here. The public advocate is the person who makes sure that the city agencies are doing the job that they were empowered to do by the charter. The last 2 are important. You have a vote on the pension board to make sure we're investing and not investing in the right places so our retirees can live their best life. And the last one is you appoint people to commissions and committees like city planning that are in charge of things like land use. The things we want to continue to work on are deeply income-targeted affordable housing, from the tenant bills that we're going to have to pass soon to strengthen rent regulation, or people who are losing their homes to foreclosure, or NYCHA, where we have 2 men playing a male measuring contest over 400,000 lives. We want to continue the work we're doing on transparency and accountability, criminal justice reform, and as well as hashtag Cuomo's MTA. I think I have the best combination of someone who has the courage to hold truth to power and who has the ability to use his activism to raise issues, but also get things done. I believe that's what we need in the public advocate's role right now. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see many familiar faces and friends in the room. For those I'm meeting for the first time, my name is Michael Blake. I come to you as an assembly member from the South Bronx and one of your candidates for public advocate. I equally come as a son of Jamaican immigrants, and because I'm a smart man to close out my campaign, my mama's here with me. I say hi, Mom, right? Mama flew up from Florida to come hang out with us. My mom worked at a factory for 40 years. She raised 4 boys. My daddy, for 29 years, was a janitor. I'm a proud member of 1199 SEIU. Went to public schools K through 12 and had the opportunity, after overcoming a near-fatal car accident in 2001, I graduated from Northwestern University in Illinois with a degree in journalism and had the opportunity to work for President Obama. I worked for President Obama for 6.5 years. I directed the Minority Women Business Portfolio at the White House and was able to lead many of the efforts on both campaigns. First campaign and, of course, in the re-election as well. I've spent a lot of time working with MBBA, and I'm grateful for what you're doing, not just today, but every single day. Collaborated with many people such as Paula Edgar and others over the years. Concretely, what have we done? Since I was in the State Assembly, raised the age, because Khalif Browder was our constituent. So changing the law so that 16 and 17-year-olds are not tried as adults any longer here in New York State. We focused on helping minority women-owned businesses get paid faster, that contract with New York State in 15 days instead of 30 days. We were able to change the law when it came to the My Brother's Keeper program, which you saw celebrated an anniversary on yesterday. Now $56 million going to help boys and young men of color go to school and graduate from school. And so I'm running for public advocate with a very clear vision called Jobs and Justice. And what does that practically mean? I believe the public advocate should be on the MTA board because the trains and buses are late every single day. And everyone is having delays in getting to work, getting to home, getting to the communities. I believe we should focus on housing in multiple aspects. What's going on in NYC is criminal, and I think we have to make sure we're clear about that. No one should have lead in their water and lead in their paint. When we think about for home ownership, there should be a moratorium on third-party transfers, on rent stabilization, taking away J51 tax credits for any landlord not implementing rent stabilization. We've been building momentum throughout this campaign. We announced today 23 new endorsements of our campaign from across the city to demonstrate the vision that we have. 1 week from tonight, we get to show people how do we make history yet again. In particular, how can we make Black history once again, which we understand Black history doesn't just happen in February, it happens every single day. But I'm asking for your support. Again, my name is Michael Blake. Our vision is Jobs and Justice, and I look forward to having a conversation with you the rest of tonight. Thank you, everybody.
So, primarily picking up on something Mr. Williams said, one of the things that's currently happening is a charter revision commission. And each time that they have one, typically one of the topics that comes up is the public advocate's office. There are some who think that the role should be abolished. There are some who think it needs additional powers. So if you could make one or more than one recommendation to the Charter Revision Commission with respect to the role, what would that be? So here we'll just start with Ms. Smalls, then to Mr. Williams, and work our way back there.
Sure. So I'd like to start off by saying that I believe that the public advocate's office should be eliminated if it's just going to be used as a stepping stone for mayor. And of the 17 candidates, you can definitely divide the candidates into 2 camps, people who are very clearly running for mayor and people who are running for public advocate. 2, with respect to the specific question that you asked, and I think my fellow folks that are running will generally agree with this, is that the public advocate should absolutely have subpoena power. While investigations is commonly cited as one of the public advocate's powers, there's no subpoena, there's no teeth behind that unless you go to court to actually demand that information. Another revision to the public advocate should absolutely have a seat on the MTA board. It is an office that is focused on the services that New Yorkers get, And there is no service that is more central to New Yorkers than the MTA. I would also say the Department of Investigation, the mayor recently fired what is supposed to be effectively the Inspector General for the city, which shows a very big breach in kind of separation of independence. And we could resolve that by putting that office, the Department of Investigation, within the Public Advocate's office.
How many minutes do we have to answer each question?
Well, the goal is to be succinct enough that each person gets an opportunity to speak.
Oh, Lord.
But also acknowledging
All right.
that some people have to leave, so it is difficult to listen, to moderate, and also time you. So just an internal clock, about two minutes. Is generally what we're looking for.
1 minute.
1 to 2 minutes.
I think 1 minute would be good. If we're telling you 1 minute, you probably. I agree that we should. This is the first time I've ever heard people saying an office is not strong enough, and instead of trying to figure out how to make it stronger, they're saying eliminate it. That makes no sense. So I agree that we should have subpoena power. The public advocate should also have an independent budget. But aside from that, I think it's a pretty powerful position. Combined with the things that I've said and described that it's supposed to do, there's also a bully pulpit. And I have had the ability from tenant organizing days, for community organizing days, to use whatever position I'm in to make sure that people's voices are empowered and listened to. And I think that's what's critically important. Every time I was told, don't take this bill, I have to do a stop, question, and frisk. Don't take the bill that has to do with Fair Chance Act or ban the box. I took it, and we got it done. And I was able to do that as a council member. And now I want to expand the work that I have been doing as a public advocate to become the public advocate. That is an incredible power. We have, unfortunately, an administration that tries to do things to the community. We want to have somebody that balances out to do things with the community. And that's why we're going to have a deputy public advocate in every borough. We want to have a satellite office as well in every borough to make sure there's a communication chain up and down to provide the balance needed whenever the administration is imposing its will.
So I think we've all agreed, we've done enough of these forums on the point about department investigations and subpoena power. As it relates to borough-specific deputy public advocates, agreed on that, but I think there also should be issue-specific priorities. To your question, I do believe for the charter revision, having a seat on the MTA board is essential. The way it currently works, the mayor has 4 appointees. So a first step is pushing for the mayor to have at least an additional appointee, which one of them being public advocate. The second change that also has to happen is working also with the state, because currently only 14 of the 23 members are voting on the MTA. So to increase the number, why is that? I think all of us can attest every single day a train is late, a bus is late, and there is no transparency at all what's happening with the MTA. They're asking for more funding, but there's no repairs that are happening. You think about the Fair Fares program. It is a program that's been flawed in its implementation thus far. Equally, there's been a lack of representation. When you only have one black person, one Latino person on the MTA to be representative of our voice, we're missing that opportunity. So as it relates to the question, having an MTA board membership for a public advocate is something that would absolutely happen. That's something I want to push for if you elect me next week.
One of the things that Letitia James was trying to do was commence litigation and really push litigation through, and she was having difficulty doing that. So as far as city charter revisions, what I would like to see included is clear authority for the public advocate to be able to have standing to maintain a case in the courts on behalf of the citizens of New York City. Now, whether or not that happens, I do intend to commence litigation. I do intend to have individual aggrieved parties join me in that litigation to withstand dismissal. But I'd like to see that clear in the city charter. Also, I've been going around, we're lawyers, so we could talk specifics. Section 24 of the city charter lists the powers of the public advocate. And if you go to subsection F, it says, in addition to other duties and responsibilities, the public advocate shall serve as the public advocate. And I'm going to run with that clause right there to mean that the public advocate is going to go on the street and solve problems personally with his office. But I'd like to see the city charter further expand on that to say that the public advocate shall serve as the public advocate and shall have the authority to investigate and resolve all issues in New York City. It's got to be very clear to make this office powerful. Thank you.
So another concept that was mentioned is sort of legislation. So as public advocate, what, if any, legislation would you introduce? We'll start with Mr. Williams and loop around.
And as I mentioned, I have a lot of experience and really prolific in passing legislation, even difficult legislation, ones that I was told I couldn't. We passed laws that we thought we wouldn't get Republican support. We were able to get that support as well. And so I think it's important to have someone who knows how to navigate the city council system to get these laws passed. There's a few bills that are coming up. One, we have to use the bully pulpit to make sure that rent regulation is improved, particularly universal rent control. We have a bill right now that calls for a moratorium on third-party transfer to make sure that people are not getting their deeds stolen from them. We have a bill that is a non-disclosure agreement, that the mayor can never again sign a non-disclosure agreement the way he signed with Amazon, because it prevented us from having an honest conversation about economic development. I am pushing for a moratorium on most rezonings in this city until we fix the MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing. If you haven't heard of that, it's the underpinning of all the bad rezonings that we've had. I'm one of 3 council members who voted against it because we knew then, what everybody agrees to now, it was a flawed policy that was the underpinning of terrible rezonings. I'm also calling for a racial impact study to be done before any rezoning is completed. We'd like that to be inside of the environmental impact study. We're going to get started as soon as we make sure that our staff and all of our people we hire are as reflective and diverse as the city itself.
Housing, healthcare, and childcare are the 3 main expenses that New Yorkers have to deal with. And so if you elect me next week, immediately we'll put forth a legislation package focused on housing, which has to have multiple elements around this. Yes, there has to be a moratorium on third-party transfers. This is something that's been a critical element in Brooklyn as well as in Southeast Queens. Secondly, my former chief of staff is the one that is running the Housing Rights Initiative, which is the effort that has proven that there's no reason why landlords should continue to have J51 tax credits when they're not implementing rent stabilization. They just won the settlement against Jared Kushner as an example of that. And so we should put forth legislation to rescind those tax credits. But lastly, I'll go to NYCHA. It is criminal what's happening at NYCHA. And the implementation of the federal monitor and the policies of that, we have to make sure we have those protections in place. And so if you give us the chance, that is what we'll move forward on pretty immediately. Second, but tied to that, is there would need to be legislation and language as it relates to what's going on for the MTA as well as education. Why? Because we look at school segregation, which has been obviously a continual problem across our city. We have to have that awareness and attentiveness on how we're going to address that. The 2 main subjects that impact college and career readiness are math and algebra. But we continue to tell our young people, we want you to do well, we're not opening up the doors for them. And so I'll put forth a skills package to connect our young people to jobs of today and tomorrow, and connect us when it comes to CUNY institutions as well. We can't keep saying to the kids, we hope you're only going to make it if you go to a 4-year institution. You can be at a 2-year institution. You can be at a vocational school. You can be at an EOC, an Educational Opportunity Center. And so it'll be a joint effort that we want to go out the gate from housing and also for skills.
So the last month I've been going around the city doing these forums with the fellow candidates. And at the end of the forum, usually the people from the audience, they come up to me and start asking me legal questions because I'm the people's lawyer. And typically it's normal stuff, normal everyday stuff. But last week, something came to my attention that was really disturbing. There's a place called the Judge Rottenberg Center in Massachusetts, and New York City and New York State, we're sending, for the last 2 decades almost, autistic children and young adults to Massachusetts to have electric shock therapy. I met a mother who had her son was tortured. Literally 6 children have died in this center, and we're sending kids for electric shock therapy to shock the autism out of them, literally. And you can look it up online. It's an open secret. And what I intend to do next Thursday is introduce legislation banning shipping kids and young adults from New York City to Massachusetts to be tortured, because that's what's going on right now. And as public advocate, I intend to expose these type of issues and get rid of them. The Judge Rottenberg Center in Massachusetts is very real, and I'm exposing it. Thank you.
So in terms of legislation, I'll just name 3 things that I would do straight out the bat. One is I would introduce legislation to extend the Fair Fares program. from monthly and weekly cards to the daily single fare cards that are not currently included in the program and are preferred by low-income New Yorkers. I would also introduce legislation to ensure that women and children are prioritized in the affordable housing lottery. And I would also introduce legislation to ensure that the public schools suspend all suspensions of children K through 12, apart from viciously violent behavior. That needs to stop.
So again, we've mentioned that a couple of the candidates have multiple events to attend to, and so we want to make sure that there is some opportunity for Q&A for all of the candidates, in particular those who have to depart early. So at this moment, I'm going to forego some of the additional questions I had for the candidates and open it up for Q&A from the audience. So I see someone in the aisle now with the microphone who will begin to take questions from those audience members. And so just be mindful that we would prefer questions and not necessarily statements or points of view that you like to share. In this moment, we would like questions for those who are present. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Alpheus Marcus. I'm with Advocates for the Community. One of the issues that y'all spoke about was NYCHA, right? Under the former public advocate, NYCHA was a big issue to which she defrayed from until it was actually put out there in the press. What would y'all do to make sure and ensure that some of the problems that's going on will actually be made, for the residents?
Let Mr. Williams go just because he has to leave, but we'll do it.
I apologize because I have to leave. Can I get 90 seconds so I can answer and close at the same time? Is that all right? Yes? Thank you. So just to answer the question, as I mentioned, NYCHA is now, we have two men, the governor and the mayor, playing a male measuring contest with 400,000 lives. I always try to remind people that both of these men worked for HUD. This is not new. The governor was the HUD secretary, and he hired somebody named Bill de Blasio. So these issues have been around for a very long time. By the way, Republicans and Democrats have failed. And so we have to hold people accountable to give a dedicated funding stream to NYCHA. I'm still waiting for the money that the governor promised when he was actually running for office. Hopefully we get it now. And we have to stop lying about management and lead that's happening in NYCHA. That is Mayor de Blasio and the administration. So we have to have a dedicated funding stream, both from the city and the state, and we have to have a conversation about management, about what's going on in NYCHA. The third one is critically important. Any plan that is put forth has to include the residents themselves. We have a tendency to try to do things to the residents without including them. They are closest to the issue, so they have the best problems. We do want to make sure we take up from what we think Tish James did a good job in many respects, but like any public advocate, there were things that could have done better. We want to use those lessons to do better on that. Housing is a critical issue. It is actually a right. And just to close out very quickly, thank you so much for having this forum and having me have the ability to speak to you. As I mentioned, I am an activist elected official, and I always say that it is true that we have a diversity issue in leadership in this city. But I don't ask folks to vote for me just because I'm a black man. I also don't want to lose those votes, so I take them. But I'm asking people to vote for me just because of the vision that I've laid out as public advocate, what I've been able to accomplish in the 10 years as a council member, 10 years before that as a tenant organizer. In addition, I'm a first-generation American. My parents came from the Caribbean and Grenada. I have Tourette's syndrome, ADHD. You may see me shake a little bit, but I'm as cool as a fan here. I made it through the public school system from preschool to master's, and my mother raised two knucklehead children right here in New York City. I'm asking you on February 26th, please remember Jumaane Williams to go from a public advocate to the public advocate. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So I have already publicly stated that I would sue NYCHA within the first 30 days in office. Jared mentioned the difficulties that the public advocate and specifically Tish encountered in pursuing an aggressive litigation agenda. But where the public advocate is on very strong ground is any lawsuits where the public advocate is demanding information, specifically from city agencies. So I would put forward and initiate a lawsuit demanding information from NYCHA about the repair requests that have been put forward, how quickly they're turned around, who is managing them, and where the money is going. because transparency, which we don't have right now, is the first step to real accountability at NYCHA. I've also said that I'll have monthly town halls with NYCHA residents. This is another thing that where NYCHA residents are saying they've even stopped reporting because they know it's going into a black hole of abyss. So making sure that they have a direct line into a city official to make sure that their concerns are being heard.
So, to your question, from 2010 to 2016, NYCHA lied at least 12 times about lead. At least. So one critical question that I have had for all current and former council members: you either knew that there was lead, elevated lead in the blood of children, and you did nothing, or you didn't ask anything at all. And I do think that is a very defining question that has to be had here. What's been happening at NYCHA has been happening for decades. It is a concern, it is a problem. We have to be concerned about that for many reasons. Now, what can be done? The federal monitor is something that we have to be engaging with for the collaboration and execution of that. I never felt we should have a federal receiver. Fortunately, that's not happening. September 26th, I was one of two people that testified to Judge Pauly to say there has to be more funding, but there has to be a change in management, because you cannot continue to have the same people running NYCHA and hope something's going to be changing. That doesn't make any sense in any way. But then we've got to take it to the next step. When it's not just lead, it's the heat and hot water. Why are they not repairing the boilers immediately? Why don't they have a better system to actually track the ticket orders that are happening? You have people that have been living in NYCHA that are repeatedly trying to figure out, why can't I get help right now? And so there would be a dedicated person to work within our office just on NYCHA concerns. I have the second largest concentration of NYCHA residents in New York City. And when it comes to the changing of money, the changing of management, and also the changing of the actual implementation to fix things every single day, that's what we're going to focus on. But to the point, going back at the beginning, I think it is critical to ask when you go into your voting booth next week. There were individuals who had a chance to work on this, who have been in leadership roles. What did they know and what did they do? 5,800 apartments with children under 6, the age of 6, now have been confirmed to have lead. The mayor and others lied about this when they said before it was only 19.
See, NYCHA housing, it didn't just start falling apart. It's been decades and decades of just complete neglect. So there's two real issues. There's a more complex issue, which is where's the money been spent, and uncovering where it's been spent and see who the responsible parties are and going after those parties. But then there's a more simple solution here. It's a building maintenance issue. That's what we're dealing with. It's building maintenance. And you look outside and all around us are buildings that seem to be able to maintain themselves. Things like boilers don't just break. They have an estimated lifespan. You can budget for them. You're just dealing with complete incompetence over decades, and now we're up to a point where now we're looking for where's the money going to come from to fix this. As a practicing attorney with experience in housing law, I'm going to focus on NYCHA housing. I'd like to push the city council to really open, the policing of NYCHA. The city of New York is really good and fully staffed with qualified officials to police all the private buildings. You don't see lead paint poisoning in private buildings. They go after it. They make sure it gets abated. You don't see ceilings just falling down. They go after it. They make sure it gets repaired. But somehow NYCHA's outside that regime. And I want to really push to get them inside that regime. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate hearing your platforms and points. My question's directed to Ms. Smalls. You mentioned that you'd like to suspend suspensions. So I'm wondering for anything but nonviolent students. So I'm wondering, do you have a plan in conjunction with that to deal with behavior and disruptive issues within schools where students would no longer be suspended?
Well, I think there are a lot of both social workers and alternative behaviors that we can target towards young children. I'm the mom of a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and the idea that a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old would be suspended from school. And as we all know, once that happens to you, it follows you throughout your time in school. So to put that marker on a child that early. So, I mean, obviously, I put the disclaimer, the caveat, outside of extremely violent behavior. If there is a child that is really, a danger to other children and is affecting the educational environment of other children, that needs to be considered in that case. But apart from that, I think the question is where is the inclination? Where do you start? And is it, somebody that may have ADHD or is just a really active boy or whatever else, and is the inclination to suspend these very, very young children that might just need an extra hand, or is it to put the onus so that only happens in very, very exceptional circumstances?
Well, since it was only directed to one, we'll just give enough time for questioning so that everyone can at least have an opportunity and before the next person has to leave.
Hi, I'm Tristan Thomas Allen. I'm from NYLAG. So it seems like everybody agrees that the Public Advocate Office should have subpoena power, and I'd just like to hear from all three of you what you would do with that first.
Mr. Rich?
Who would I subpoena first? Good question. NYCHA. Everyone from NYCHA. I want to know where the money is. I mean, we're not going to be able to subpoena anyone at MTA because that's state, but we could deal with the New York City Housing Authority. And I'd like to know where all the money is over the time, for decades and decades of gross mismanagement, where things were funded, but it didn't seem like anything went into the buildings. I'd like to subpoena everybody involved.
Mr. Blake?
So this is a distinguishing factor here. So yes, it would be NYCHA, but something Jared said is not accurate. It is not just state that has abilities to MTA, and we absolutely have to have subpoena power in the MTA because the mayor has 4 appointees on the board. And so if the MTA is conveying that there is a $60 billion need for some portions of their program, but they're trying to raise fares, how have you been spending the money? What has been happening for decades with all this funding that has gone to you? And I think it is very critically important that they haven't been able to implement fair fares for many reasons, one of which it's a flawed approach in what they're trying to do. To Dawn's point, which is accurate, a weekly and monthly program alone doesn't make sense if you're trying to figure out how you're going to make your ends meet. So I do believe it has to be both immediately. What's happening at NYCHA and the absolute mismanagement at NYCHA, especially when we're talking about a $32 billion capital need, especially when we look at Judge Pauly originally rejected the proposal that came from NYCHA because he said in the record, a 52-page document, that NYCHA was lying about how bad the conditions were and did not have a plan to address it. But I think simultaneously you got to have an immediate subpoena on the MTA because you have to understand what has been happening for billions of dollars that have been going into a system and the infrastructure has not been implemented in any real way. The 2 main factors for delays when it comes to trains in particular is overcrowding, but then also it's the signals. And so help us to understand, if we know this is the reason for delays, why have you not put money to fixing the 2 main reasons for the delays?
Ms. Waltz?
I think I agree with Jared that I'm not sure a subpoena to the MTA will work, though I'm fully supportive of demanding information because the charter of the public advocate really is targeted towards city agencies, but it's definitely worth a try. What I would say is, I've already said that I would sue NYCHA. If I had subpoena power, I wouldn't need to go to court to do that. And then the other thing that I would put forward is that meeting with housing advocates, they've said that there is a real lack of transparency from tenant complaints about landlords, and it really affects their ability to know what's going on and to advocate. So some of that information, I think, is going to 311. I think some of it is going into different city agencies. So really subpoenaing information about tenant complaints about big and small landlords so that we can see what's really going on and figure out how to address it.
Hi, I have a question about specialized science high schools. It's near and dear to my heart because both of our children attended Bronx Science, and they had an incredible opportunity there. Prior to that, they were in a gifted magnet program. I will say that all of the students that we knew actually prepared for that exam with a Princeton review course. Virtually no one simply got an exam prep book and prepared on their own. It's really rigorous. And so much of the focus has been on the students who have not been able to get in. And of course, we do want to make it an equitable situation. But people fail to look at those students who get in. What are they doing? What advantages are they given in order to be very competitive? I think it's something that people really need to fight for, in part because the top colleges come to that school to recruit students. That's an incredible opportunity in terms of access. And I think that if we have a broader knowledge of what's going on in terms of preparation, we can fashion a better solution. So my question to you is, will you pursue a study in earnest to gather empirical information to better understand this problem as to why kids are not getting in, but more importantly, what do the kids do to get in? What advantages do they have? And how do you correct for the differences?
Mr. Blake?
Absolutely. When we look at the current numbers, that only 9% of Black and Latino students are getting into specialized high schools, we have to recognize that something is not working for a large number, but equally and simultaneously figure out what is working for those that are getting in. And so not only would I call for an immediate study to understand the process of it, which in large part there's a pipeline issue. The Times and others communicated we're not addressing the pipeline, how we get students there. Too many communities are not even having a chance out the gate. It's also around the preparation. You know, if someone doesn't have the resources for the tutoring and the mentoring, that impacts this. When we look at the questions around a multi-measured approach, I firmly believe that it should not be based on just one exam. You know, that my future should not be dependent upon what happens to me in 3 hours. If you go to a multi-measure approach, it would go from 9% to 45% of Black and Latino students getting into specialized high schools in the current structure. And so you have to assess how obviously we create that dynamic, but fundamentally it's around the pipeline. And the person I've asked to help lead on this would be two people. Maya Wiley, who is one of our campaign co-chairs, who has been leading the effort around the school segregation data we've seen in terms of addressing that. And then David Banks, who's another one of our co-chairs, who is the CEO of the Eagle Academy, which, as you know, has the highest graduation rate of Black and Latino students in all of New York. And we want to listen to both of them because we want to assess it from what's happening in terms of addressing the segregation problems in our schools that are part of the pipeline, while equally understanding the efforts that have to happen from someone like David to bring that support. Concretely, to close it out, what is something that can be done that we've seen? Why did we see data substantially go up to lead to better opportunities for a lot of young people? It was community and family engagement, for example. Moving some of the parental meetings that were happening at Wednesdays at 7 p.m. when parents couldn't get there in the first place, and moving them to Saturday morning breakfast so that families could then be present to understand the pipeline of how you help the child. So those are the kinds of things that we started to look at that we would like to replicate and take to greater scale if given the chance next week.
Whenever a kid asks me about the SAT or the LSAT, the first thing I always tell them is make sure you take a preparation course. Because without the preparation course, you're not competing with everybody who's taking a preparation course. You know, they don't teach you about material, they teach you about the format of the test. And you're getting a leg up just on that. And as public advocate, I want to make sure, I'd want to focus attention to make sure that every kid has the opportunity to take a test prep course. But we also have to talk about why there's such a fight to get into only a few good schools. We need more schools that are good. This is a big problem. There's too many failing schools in New York City, and we need more great schools in New York City. Now, unfortunately, I do have to leave now. My great Aunt Pearl, her Democratic Club in Staten Island was the first group to invite me to anything when I first announced my run, so I'm going to run over there. But I would love to hang out with you guys the rest of the night. I'll give my little 30-second spiel. I'm Jared Rich. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a lawyer. I'm independent. I'm beholden to no one. If you're sick of politics as usual, if you want someone outside of the political arena, if you want someone to truly represent you and the people of New York City, then I'm the alternative option for you. Check out my website, jaredrich.nyc. Vote for me February 26th. Thank you very much.
After that, I had to refocus. What was the question? I got it. Specialized high schools. So I am not opposed to a study, but I would say I think we know what's going on here. I'm a graduate of a specialized high school. My view is, one, I don't support the mayor's plan to get rid of the test. I think we need to amend the test to include broader criteria so that people cannot just cram. I heard a story about a man that was a tutor for a group of kids in Queens that started at 4th grade. Like literally for years for this one exam, and it was a class of 27 students, and 26 out of the 27 got into a specialized high school. So if you know that that's happening, you have to have some measure of evaluation that is beyond just the exam, whether that be a writing portion. We did that for the LSAT. You had the fill in the dot part, and then you had to write. You actually had to form an argument. Whether you're using other metrics that educators can come up with, but we can't continue with a system where these the gem on the hill is not available to Black and brown students. And, as a graduate of a specialized high school, I think all the graduates and all the people that appreciate specialized high schools know what's going on. I mean, they know why there's the barrier there for Black and brown students, and I think changing and amending the test to have broader criteria, and then also investing in prep courses for those people that can't afford it, though obviously nobody's going to invest in 4 years worth of prep, if they don't have the resources to do it for one exam.
So at this moment, we're going to take 2 more questions, and we're going to give each of the candidates an opportunity to give their closing remarks.
Hi, my name is Chandra. I'm actually not affiliated with an organization, but I just completed nursing school. And my biggest thing is public advocacy, especially with being in the healthcare field. But what I primarily want to focus on right now is housing. So I noticed you primarily focused on NYCHA housing, but I also wanted to know what your stance is in regards to Mitchell-based housing and low-income housing. So I just want to kind of preference with like a quick context. So my mother moved into Mitchell-Lama housing in 1993. I moved out in 2009. Since then, my mother has basically been faced with what is, in my opinion, harassment. So since every year my mother signs a HUD form, her rent is never the same month after month. My mother's received several eviction notices stating that she's owed $3,000, $6,000. She's gone to court. They've dismissed it. A lot of times her Mitchell-based housing doesn't even show up for representation when she goes to court. And my mother's at the point where I've watched my 71-year-old mother break down and cry because she feels like she's being forced out of her home because she's in a 2-bedroom apartment that's $550, which they can clearly get fair market value with. So my point is, what protections are in place to ensure that seniors like my mother are not basically being forced out because they can get more money?
So this is directly on point, this is directly on point to what I was talking about when I was talking about subpoena power and the tenant complaints, people who are being harassed by their landlords, people who have landlords that are doing questionable construction to try to get rent increases, all of these tricks that landlords use to force people out of their homes. This is something that's going on. People are complaining about it. People are looking for help. And right now, there is not a good central place to track how much of that is going on, and frankly, from which landlords, right? Because if they're doing that to your mom, they're probably not just doing it just to her, right? And so we need a method, and we need to compile that information so we know we can add these bad actors to the bad landlords list, so we can all, not just in the public advocate's office, but in our community, hold these guys accountable to make sure that they're not using tricks and loopholes to force people out of their homes.
Is your mom in a state-ran Mitchell-Lama or a city-ran? Do you know if it's HCR or HPD? You know? HPD? So I would love to talk with you offline from here. I'm actually the chair of the Mitchell-Lama Committee for the state itself. And we actually, walking in, was having a similar conversation around this. It is absolutely discriminatory what a lot of these management companies are doing. Because exactly what you're saying, they're intentionally just trying to push people out to try to get access to it to make it market rate. We saw this and we were attacked this and we won this when Wavecrest tried to go after a lot of individuals in our own district. And they were not permitting for water to be turned on in the building. It was truly inhumane. We brought in lawyers, we won the case, and we pushed back on that. And so not only is it unacceptable, there are tactical things we can do. We worked with Comptroller DiNapoli a year ago because we saw that people were being jumped on waiting lists in Mitchell-Lama that were waiting for the next unit, and then somehow somebody found their boy, they found their friend, they jumped what was going on, and you had been waiting to be the next one up for all this time, and there was nothing happening there. We got serious when it came to succession rights, because someone should be the next one up, and all of a sudden, well, I didn't see this exact name, this exact language, you didn't sign the form in this exact way, but you clearly know that's the child, right? That's the daughter, that's the son, you know who's supposed to be here. We took it a step further when it came to protections, not just for seniors, which is one of the reasons I said we have to expand the SCREE program, but also to make sure middle-income housing was being protected. And so we've been talking through a Mitchell-Lama 2020 vision of what we would like to implement if elected, because too often what is clearly happening is that the city and the state have had strategies to push people out to get market rate. That's all they're trying to do. It's one of the reasons we've said repeatedly that we shouldn't have a RAD program being implemented across the city. So agreed on the point. It's not just about NYCHA. It is also about how we're helping people to keep their homes, and would love to be able to work with you on that. The reason why I'm the chair of the Mitchell-Lama Committee is my office is in Concourse Village. We have 1,808 units. We saw this throughout our complex, and we were tired of seeing people being taken advantage of. So I would love to be able to work with you on that, and to be able to help not just your mother, but help anyone else that's been going through this with Mitchell-Lama across the city.
So, final question.
My name's Meredith Jones. I don't have an organization. But I was, and I don't really want to ask a question about policy. What I want to know is, what are the resources, what's the staff for the public advocate's position, and do you think that's adequate to do the kinds of things you've been speaking of here tonight?
It's only about $3.5 million, but I'm a Jamaican, so we can find ways to make it work, right? So, all right, we figured this out, right, Mama? So, you know, each advocate has had different visions. Of course, Tish went down the road of having a greater expansion in terms of attorneys within the office, which obviously made sense. Before that, de Blasio had a broader approach around deputy public advocates. That's where some of this vision has come from. Mark Green was thinking more from a consumer perspective, as was Betsy. I think everything that I've walked through can definitely be implemented within the budget as it is, within the public advocate's office. Because we're talking through legislation, which the public advocate can introduce legislation to city council, oversight, which is already within the charter. The hiring of staff would be within that budget constraints, and not looking to expand beyond that in terms of what would be affordable. But I do think this is one of the reasons why the budget for the public advocate cannot just be tied to what the city council is giving you. It has to be independent, because it is inevitable that if you're just tied to what city council and the mayor is saying, inevitably they're going to push back on you wanting to do more. The whole purpose of the position is to have oversight and to see what the others are not doing. So they're not going to try to give you more money to hold them accountable. And so I think we can obviously push forward on that. That is something we can definitely work on. But everything that I've worked through so far absolutely can and will be implemented when elected.
So again, the budget is $3.5 million. The way that I have, everything that I've outlined that I would do is within that budget. I believe the public advocate could definitely benefit from additional resources. But within the $3.5 million, I would organize my office to have a team of people that specifically focused on my main program areas. So just by example, I would have a team of people that focus day in and day out on the subway, every benchmark, every deliverable, every funding stream. And so you would never have a situation where the governor took $5 million away from the MTA to subsidize some upstate ski resorts, right? Because somebody would be there watching that on a regular basis. So that's my way of dealing with a limited budget, making sure that we go in deep on the issues that I've outlined. I think, again, I don't need to hire a whole staff of attorneys because I am an attorney, though obviously would have some support there in terms of filing key litigation like suing NYCHA. So definitely could benefit from additional resources, but absolutely think we can do the job that I've outlined within the resources allocated.
So I'd like to thank everyone for coming. So we're going to give each of the candidates a opportunity to make some final remarks. Just reading a couple of notes. So Melissa Mark Viverito and Tony Herbert send their regrets for being unable to attend. They initially had RSVP but were unable to attend tonight. Additionally, I just want to remind everyone that the New York City Campaign Finance Board is sponsoring their debate tomorrow at 7 p.m. And both of these candidates, along with 5 additional candidates who have met the Campaign Finance Board's criteria, will participate in that debate tomorrow. So again, at 7, I believe on New York One, and it's also available on their Facebook page for those who don't have it. And I think you can watch it live stream also. So again, there will be one final debate for 7 of the candidates who met the criteria of the New York Campaign Finance Board tomorrow at 7 p.m. So just in case you didn't get enough information, they will be at this again, sort of putting home the final notion. And again, a reminder that the election is next Tuesday. Polls open at 6 a.m., polls close at 9 p.m. So we thank everyone for coming out, and we'll give each candidate an opportunity to give their closing remarks, and at which point we'll then hear from Jason Clark. You can decide which way you want to go.
Thank you again for letting us be here with you. A week from tonight, we get a chance to determine what kind of vision we want for the city. We have never had a citywide special election. And so the question is, how do we unite the city? How do we focus on the issues that are a priority for all of us? We think about what the conversations we had around housing, around the MTA, around education, around criminal justice reform. And I'm coming to you as someone who, for the last 4.5 years in the Assembly, have been working on the issues that are relevant to New Yorkers. And the last 13 years from my work in the White House and thereafter has been relevant across the country. If you believe that we should have a representative voice on the MTA, I'm asking for your vote. If you believe that we should be focusing on housing in all aspects, I'm asking for your vote. If you believe we should focus on building schools and not jails, I'm asking for your vote. If you believe that we should still be at the table to figure out what happened with Amazon, where 25,000 jobs that could have come here, but it should have been done correctly with union protections and low-income protections and people of color and women, I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for responsible leadership to help unite us. It's the reason why former Lieutenant Governor Dick Ravitch has endorsed our campaign, or Maya Wiley, or David Banks, or the people across our city have believed in our campaign. So I'm asking for you, a week from tonight, to believe in us. My name is Michael Blake. I'm the second name on the ballot. Our entire vision is jobs and justice for the people. My family can go from no house in Jamaica to the Black House at Northwestern to the White House in D.C. to the State House in Albany. I believe we can make some changes here in City Hall as your next public advocate. God bless you, MBBA, and thank you for allowing us to be here tonight.
Michael always brings it home, so I'm going to come out from this table and see what I can do, you know. So the election is a week from today, and this is a very important position that is supposed to be independent of the mayor, the city council, and city government. it is important that that person be truly independent. I spent the last 3.5 years as a commissioner on the Joint Committee on Public Ethics, which is the statewide agency with oversight of the governor, the attorney general, state assembly, and state senate members, including the lobbyists in state. I am a first-time candidate, despite the fact that this is new for me. I am not brand new, having worked multiple presidential campaigns and 2 tours in Washington. But what I am is completely independent of the local political machine. And that has value for this job. I'm also not running for mayor. I've already publicly stated I don't want to be mayor. I'm not running, sorry?
I don't run for mayor either.
Michael, come on. I'm sorry. So I'm gonna finish.
I believe that, but I'm not, so.
Okay. I'm not running for mayor. And of the city's leadership, between the mayor, the comptroller, and the city council speaker, they are all white men. There are no women, and there are no people of color. So we are in 2019 with 17 people on the ballot. We can't elect a woman to this role. I believe I'm the most qualified candidate, male or female. But I do think representation of women in city leadership is important, particularly coming out of 2018, the blue wave that was largely fueled by women and women of color. The last point I'd like to make is that I am one of a very small number of attorneys that are running in this race, which I think is an important qualification for a public advocate. Tomorrow on that stage, which has the 7 leading candidates for this office, I will be the only attorney on that stage. So we've talked a lot about lawsuits. We've talked about, Tish was a graduate of Howard Law School. We've talked about how aggressive she was on litigation. And the fact is that it helps to have an attorney as public advocate if you want to fully take advantage of all the tools of that office. So I hope this was informative. I invite you guys to check me out on my website, Dawn for New York. I hope to earn your support next Tuesday, February 26th. Thank you very much.
And can we give one last round of applause for our candidates today? And one more round of applause for our moderator, John Owens. And again, I would just like to, I think it's actually apt that the 2 individuals that we have here at the end of our program is Assemblymember Blake, who we've done 2 programs with the MBBA with at Claremont Neighborhood Center that he's been a big part of. And of course, Dawn Smalls, who is an MBBA member who I've seen at various MBBA events. And I think that's important because even though today we're talking about a political office, the work that they do, we have to do things that are supportive of that. And that's not from a political standpoint, but making sure that organizations like the Metropolitan Black Bar Association are out there to improve the administration of justice. So that means some of the stuff that we're doing is we're starting a network of legal clinics. They're going to start next month in areas such as Staten Island and Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx. We're going to be launching our first ever Judiciary Training Academy so we can make sure that qualified members of this organization can go out there and advocate or make sure that we have a fair and equitable criminal justice system by being on the bench. We just launched earlier this month Raising the Bar with the MBBA so that we can get out there and talk about issues such as gender equity, talk about issues such as housing, and make sure that we can play a role in improving the administration of justice in our community. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we have people who are supporting us. So that means become a member of the MBBA. Justina Rivera, where is there? I saw her earlier. There's her hand right there. She is our Vice President of Membership. Go to her and she will help make sure that you become a member. If you're not interested in becoming a member just yet, but you want to support, We've got awesome t-shirts and sweatshirts for you. So whatever it is, if you enjoyed what you had today, make sure you figure out a way to get involved. Usually we give these to the folks who participate in our programs, but we want to make sure that there are no issues on election day for our folks. So if you guys want to,
keep your swag.
So we can hold on to our swag. But again, thank each one of you for coming out today. I hope you found today informative, and we look forward to doing more programs like this so we can get out there and advocate for ourselves and make sure folks who are advocating for us are in positions to do so. Thank you.